Welcome to God with George Ortega. This is episode number 76, and I'm recording it on Sunday, February 7th, 2021 at 7:50 p.m. Eastern Time. What I'd like to start with is an explanation of why God is not just a belief or a hope or a faith, that God is actually the only being, the only thing that exists. And I don't call God a thing because I tend to refer to God in the person in a manner which I think is more accurate. So yeah, the idea is that we don't have to rely on faith to understand that God exists. And the evidence for this really couldn't be clearer. Let's, if we start with the first, all right, to know whether something exists, you have to define something. For example, there's a table right in front of me. We define a table as something that, we put things on. It has some legs. They're made out of wood or metal or plastic or glass, whatever. But, we have an understanding of what a table is. And so, like, when we encounter a table, we can say, yes, tables exist. So with God, it's the same thing. I mean, like, now God is different from everything else that exists because God is unique in that way. There is only one God, and God encompasses everything. That's the distinction, whereas everything else is within God. But that's a bit tangential to our proof. So let's start with the first sentence of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We today understand the heavens and the earth, or at least the earth, our world as our observable known universe. That aspect of reality that we can observe, measure, detect, interact with, sometimes not interact with, but we can perceive it. And so, like, we could just say that the world is, as the Bible says, and not going into its age or how it formed. But the point is that reality, this world, did not create itself. There's a law in physics that says that matter can neither be created nor destroyed, but that presupposes after it's been created by God. And maybe, the more accurate understanding is God manifested this world. So let's see if we can get into that some more. So again, like, this universe, reality, the world exists. It did not create itself. So we define God most fundamentally as the creator. God created the world. Now, and that's, God has other attributes, but that fundamental attribute of, definition of God as the creator, if there's a creation, this world that we're perceiving, we're aware of, we define God as what created it all, us, everything. So again, that alone proves logically, and logic is the tool that we have. Our intuition isn't nearly as accurate as our logic. Most of the time, perhaps all the time, I don't know. But so all right, so like now, it's not, we're going to now logically deduce from this creator God existing some of God's other attributes. For example, God is supposed to be omnipresent. That's one of it. And again, if you look on Wiki, Wiki, the page on God, it'll go through these attributes. And we, my former co-host and I, Josh, devoted episodes 3 to 7 to this, 5 episodes. So if you want to get into this in a lot more detail, you can explore those episodes. But I'll try to get through everything in just 1 episode now. So so again, if you create the world, this reality, you have to ask yourself, all right, well, what did God create this reality from? And that's when you understand, well, before this world was created, the only thing that existed was God. Now God may have created some angels first and then the world, but that just takes us back a step further. So the idea is like, what did God create angels, the world from? The only thing that existed was God. So that's why I say it's more of a manifestation than creation. God, in God's mind, to use a metaphor, created this world. And I imagine, there are probably perhaps an infinite number of other worlds. But certainly, we're not alone in this universe. I mean, there's probably life all around us. So all right, so like, we understand that God as the creator exists, and then we also understand that if God is a creator and God existed, the only thing that existed before the creation, that God is everything. So now we have God as a creator, God as omnipresent, everywhere. If God is the creator and God is everywhere, God created the laws of nature. God created the causality that governs this world. God created how this world runs. So what that means is God is all powerful, not meaning that God can do anything. God cannot make 1 + 1 = 3 because that's not the world God created. But God can, anything that happens and anything that actually happens must be fundamentally attributed to God. And God works through people, God works through the laws of nature, God works through angels perhaps, but God is the fundamental power, agency behind everything. And there's ways to explain that. Causality is the way this world works. So if you take everything that's happening in the world at this very moment, that was caused most generally by the state of this world, or let's say just the planet, whatever, to limit it. So everything, the universe. So everything in the universe that's happening right now was caused by the state of the universe previously and the laws that are within that state. And that state was caused by the last state or previous state, and that state was caused by the previous state. So you have this infinite causal regress, perhaps more of an eternal causal regress, although regress and eternity seem a bit redundant. So it basically, this cause and effect chain goes back to, according to our scientific understanding, the Big Bang. And here's where we get to something where logic breaks down. But it breaks down, but it doesn't, it also proves God's existence. God is not only the creator, omnipresent, omnipotent, God is also eternal. And how do we know that? Well, if God was all that existed before the world, it's difficult to imagine God just coming into being, because that would mean that God would have been created by something other than God. And so we assign God to the understanding that no, there is, that God is the fundamental reality without creation because God is eternal. Okay, so, and again, that's, our logic can't completely understand that because we say, well, how could something be eternal? But, that's, I think, a better answer. There's 2 choices. We can either think that God is eternal or God is finite. If we believe God is finite, then we're left with the puzzle of who or what created God. And again, if we're defining God as the creator, it seems that God must be eternal, not just going into the past, but into the future. All right. And this is the God that's described in the Bible, incidentally. This isn't a God that I'm, fabricating, whatever. This is, this is God. And then again, it's all derived from this first sentence in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If you create the world, you create it from yourself. And you're everything both before the world and after the world. And if you create the world and you're everything, you naturally control everything. And again, so like our best guess is that God is eternal. God always existed. God may have created an infinite number of worlds before us, but God existed before those worlds. All right. So, but we've already proven, absolutely proven with a 100-degree level of certainty that God exists. And just like, for example, we could say with 100% accuracy, certainty, that reality exists. This may be a dream. It may be your dream. It may be my dream. It may be God's dream. I'm not characterizing the nature of this reality, but we are certain that this reality exists. Because if it didn't, you wouldn't be watching this. I wouldn't be saying this. So basically, and God created this reality. So again, we've already proven logically that God must exist. It's not, God is not a hope or belief. All right, I've got 16 minutes left. So if God created everything and is everything and controls everything, then there's no way that God doesn't know everything. And perhaps some things are unknown to God, but that doesn't make sense to me. If God is everything, if God, let's say God existed eternally before he created any worlds, and again, that blows our mind. How do we, that's difficult to conceive of, but God must know God. I mean, like God is, look around you, look at the complexity of this universe, of the human body, of the human brain. God is like, perfectly intelligent. God is not like, a rock or something. God is the intelligence that's so perfect that created, this, that a human being couldn't come close to creating, perhaps ever, probably ever. So God knows everything. Well, actually, so that's, I've got 15 minutes left, and I just wanted to go through that. There's a lot of implications that come from this knowledge, but I'll leave that to other episodes. What I want to do now is just like turn to other topics, and because I have my my nifty list of show topics that I've got to print them out actually. So let's see. God as the only being. All right, I like this one. We are beings, and animals are beings, and single-celled organisms are beings, but we're really kind of like sub-beings, like, for example, a molecule of water in the Pacific Ocean is part of this Pacific Ocean. The entity is the Pacific Ocean, and basically, we are part of God. Everything is part of God. And that's why I say that God is really the only being that exists. We're manifesting God's existence. God, it's kind of like God has a mind, and God willed this world into existence, and God has to sustain it, maintain it, I would imagine. Although, this topic of causality complicates that a bit, because like once God sets in motion this world with the law of causality, basically just runs on its own. But no, I think even so, God still has to for example, if you have a thought in your mind, if you want it to continue, you've got to keep thinking about it. Now, we as human beings can't do that very long. God, as perfectly intelligent and powerful, can do that forever, presumably. So, all right, so what else? Thou shalt not want. I'm just going through these. I'll get more organized with this later, but there's a psalm. I think it's the 23rd psalm. The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. Now, what does that mean? It could mean two things. One, it could mean that because God is our shepherd, God tends to us. We don't lack anything. Sometimes we feel like we lack things, but most fundamentally, and I know that's, that's a difficult kind of assertion. For example, some of us are lacking food or health and all. But I guess on a more fundamental level, you know, I guess like we're here like 80, 90, 100 years, and then we continue to exist. So, no, I'm no, I'm trying to kind of like provide evidence for our not really lacking things, but um, it seems like we lack certain things. But I think maybe in that sense, it's saying that, well, we don't lack what's most, that God is always with us. That, regardless of how dire our situation, we're dying, whatever it is, God is with us, and God is all we need. So in that sense, we're not lacking anything. But I think another sense of thou shalt not want is related to that. A lot of times we go through life wanting, and it's unavoidable. When we're young, especially very young, we want to be older because we see older people doing things that we can't do, talking, driving. There's a lot of stuff that we want to get old enough to do. And we're constantly wanting, and like the idea is, and we can't avoid wanting in a certain sense because God made us to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So naturally, we're going to want anything that brings us pleasure and happiness. And we're going to want to avoid anything that causes us pain and suffering. But I think what this means is that if we recognize, especially, the vast majority of us who really have so much more than we need, our basic needs are met, hundredfold. And to the extent that we focus on what we have, like we do every Shabbat, every Sabbath, we cultivate this attitude of appreciating what we have rather than like dwelling or suffering what we don't have. So I think that's the message of that line. Again, it may have two different meanings. I'm not really sure what the author intended. And that actually brings me into something that's not on the list here as a next topic. But and I went into this several episodes ago, but it's important. Some people say, well, the Bible, everything that's in the Bible is God's word. It's divinely not just inspired, but compelled. And yes, that's true, but so is everything else. The Bible, Grapes of Wrath, and any kind of book that you can think of, anything, is not just God. God just had me lose my train of thought on this. All right, so yes, so like everything is God's will. So like, yes, every word in the Bible came from God. But here's a kind of like a consideration you may want to explore. We human beings, completely understand this is certain. We're not perfect. We're certainly not perfect. We certainly make mistakes. There are various things we can be certain about in our world, and that's one of them. So what we have today as our Bible may not be, probably, most probably, almost certainly isn't what God originally told us back then. And the reason being is, like, for example, let's say it's Moses or one of the other prophets. God tells them something, and then they tell it to the next person, because that's how this has been transmitted to us. Initially, it was all oral, verbal, person to person, people to people. Then it was finally written down because they thought that, there was so much stuff that it would be forgotten. But you have to understand, you have to consider, because we're not perfect, and because this knowledge God imparted to our prophets has gone through so many transferences, person to person, and generation to generation, millennia to millennia, you have to suppose that there are misapprehensions. And you can see the problem with believing that the problem of believing that this Bible, every single word was accurately transcribed, as it was given 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years. The problem with that is asserting inadvertently, but certainly, that we are infallible. That all those people, got that right, got whatever it was told to them, and they told it to the next person right and all. And see, the problem with that's a major problem in theology, in Judaism, Christianity, Islam, because to the extent we do that, to the extent we assert that every single word in the Bible is God's, again, everything is God's will, because everything is God's will. All our thoughts come from God. But to assert, how most people do, that our written Torah now is exactly the same, that no mistakes were made between the God telling the first person several thousand years ago and us, again, is to assert that we are infallible, and that's blasphemous. Blasphemy has different meanings, but one of them is ascribing to human beings a power or attribute reserved to God. And so it's important to understand that, because our evolution, our religions evolve. We've learned so much from the Torah, from the Bible, New Testament, Old Testament, but we evolve. As human beings, our spirituality evolves, our understanding of God evolves. Before, like, very few people understand that God is a necessary, logical being, that God's existence, isn't a question, is in no way in doubt. Very few people understand that. So religions evolve. So eventually, we will receive, for example, all right, let's do this. We've got about 4.5 minutes. There's still more to learn that the Bible really wasn't clear about. One of them is, like, because God is all powerful, this idea that anything is up to us is, again, blasphemous, but it's also completely mistaken. It's the thoughts you're having right now, whatever they may be, it doesn't matter what they are, they're just coming into your mind. You have to understand that. You have to appreciate that. You can't, they came from here. They're coming from a part of your mind, from the unconscious, really, that you're not even aware of. So for us to assert that, yeah, we are, fundamentally creating these thoughts. No, these thoughts are created through our biology. It's like our biology perhaps are like transmitters, like radio transmitters or television receivers, not receivers, not transmitters. So, although who knows, maybe we can transmit, but that's, that's another reality. And I did 212 episodes of my show, Exploring Illusion, Free Will. You can see it in the background. That's the sign we had for a while on the set. And And it would be exceedingly, extremely, wonderfully helpful for our world to understand this, to understand that because God is all powerful, and because God is everything, and because we're just manifesting God's existence, this entire reality is just manifesting God's existence, that what we do is really God compelling us to do this. I mean, a good example is like, for example, my hand is now on the mouse, moving the cursor around. If my hand had a consciousness like a human being, my hand could assert, oh, well, I'm doing this on my own, No, the arm's not doing it. No, my brain isn't doing it. I'm doing it on my own. And that's what we do. We find ourselves thinking things and doing things and feeling things and mistakenly believe that it's us rather than God. Again, I did 212 episodes. I've written 3 books on this, podcasts, a whole major initiative. And so yeah, just YouTube, George Ortega Free Will, it'll take you there, or the website, causalconsciousness.com. But the idea is like, once we get this right, one of our major problems as people is we tend to be arrogant, prideful, boastful. And to the extent that we understand that nothing is up to us, we have no logical reason for that. Anything that any ability we have, anything we do that's good, we have to acknowledge that it's because God is making us do this, not just allowing us, because allowing us kind of like connotes that part of it is up to us. No, God is manifesting God's intelligence, God's creativity, God's everything through our every thought, and so that's important to understand. All right, we've got about a minute left, and I just wanted to go through this because like some people, don't appreciate that God is more than just a belief or a faith or hope. God is really the only being that exists, and with a certainty, 100%, 1,000% certainty, we can say that, because the world didn't create itself, and we define God as the being who created the world. All right, so thanks for watching. Catch this show every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. on White Plains Community Media, channel 76 if you get Optimum, 45 if you get Verizon. And if you live in some of the surrounding areas like Ardsley, Tarrytown, Scarsdale, if you get Verizon, you can get them also. But again, they're on YouTube. All the episodes are on YouTube, so you catch them there. And all right, so like Andy was supposed to join us. Hopefully he'll be joining us tomorrow. I'm running out of time. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back, God willing, soon. Thanks.